networking site. It is important for me to come up with a description because this is a new and emerging phenomenon. And in January 2013, there are 12 million users of Facebook users in Malaysia, which equals to 46.1% of the whole country population. And the informal learning process is becoming a trend due to the popularity of the social networking site as a medium of interaction. And the second purpose is for me to investigate the effectiveness of social networking site as an instrument to gather evidence for teachers' engagement in informal learning. And this is my direct response to Throwback 2007 and Straka 2004 that argue existing methods that use in informal learning research, which is interview and questionnaires, have weaknesses in gathering empirically grounded valid evidence. So I'm exploring with the use of social networking site to gather ungathered evidence, and I hope I'll be able to do so. And in this presentation, I'm going to present okay, let's look at the data generation. I'll begin with the purposive sampling, in which I identified 5 English language teachers who are very active in engaging in informal learning, and then from there, I use snowball technique to recruit more teachers. And I use ethnographic methods in which I observe Facebook timelines and Facebook group for 6 months. And then I distribute 56 questionnaires. And then out of these 56 teachers who completed the questionnaire, 34 are willing to be interviewed by me. And now we move on to the main content of my study, which is the methodological and ethical issues. I'll present the methodology and ethics separately, but the underlying assumption is that regardless of how they are conceptualized, they are never entirely separable from each other, because for every methodological decision, it is bounded by ethical decision. Okay. So this is the first methodological issue, which is the question of presence. In this research, I face a dilemma in deciding how to be an effective participant observer in my research. This is because in a virtual ethnographic research, like what I'm doing now, being a participant observer is not a straightforward idea. Because in this kind of research, I am presented with 2 choices, whether I want to be an active participant observer who interact and post comments and things on Facebook. I also have another choice of being a participant observer in form of a lurker. A lurker is someone who read the online content, the Facebook groups, without the participants noticing me are doing the activity. And it is a form of participant observation, because reading the online content itself is a form of interaction. And when we read online content, we are already in a real way, because most online content is read, interpreted, and not necessarily interacted with by adding the reader's own post. So basically, I have to make 2 choices, whether I want to be a lurker or whether I want to be a participant observer in its traditional form. And being a lurker is very interesting for me, because I can observe the phenomenon in an unobtrusive way. So it's a good idea, because I'm not going to affect the activity that I'm studying. So being a naive researcher, I begin by being a lurker, because I hope not to spoil my participants' activity. But then I'm questioned with the ethical problem. Since I am now lurking around gathering information, should I obtain informed consent from them? And then the second one, but then I begin by being a lurker. But then later I realized that being a lurker is not enough for me to gain full understanding, because many posts and comments on Facebook are incomplete. For example, just look at this. The teacher said, "Feel like having a spy camera at my brooch, James Bond style, to record the way students talk to their teachers." So I do not know what's really happening in the classroom, whether this is a negative post or whether this is positive. So I have no choice, and in the end I have to move from being a lurker to an active participant observer, in which I post what's happening, what's going on. So I post and act as a teacher in this research. Okay, and this is the second methodological issue, which is the question of authenticity. On social networking site, especially like Facebook, fake profiles are everywhere. Everyone can pretend to be a teacher, to be a Malaysian, and then I don't want to end up observing fake Facebook profiles, because this is very important, because if they are not real English language teachers, their concern will be different, and their language that they use, it will affect my data. So to ensure that I'll be observing authentic Facebook profile, I use the snowball technique, and this is the reason why at the very beginning I say that I start with purposive sampling and then I move on to snowball technique. So because I ask the teachers, recommend the teachers who are actively involved in informal learning and that that they are real Malaysian English language teachers. So basically I tackled this issue quite easily. Yeah. And this is now we move on to the ethical issue, the informed consent. I was very a tough decision to decide whether I need to apply for informed consent or not. Because literature review reveals that there is an issue whether in an online research we need to apply informed consent or not, due to the blurred boundaries of what is public and what is private in internet. For example, Facebook. To some extent, it might be private because I have to put my password to log in into the Facebook. But when I log in into the Facebook, I can read my friends' posts and comments without I have to put their own password. So it's kind of like a blurred boundary, what is public and what is private on Facebook. And then after I examined the Facebook statement of use, Facebook stated clearly that for every data gathering using Facebook, I need to apply for the informed consent. Then yes, there come the end of my dilemma. I decided to obtain the informed consent. But then what's the best way for me to obtain the informed consent? Should I send it to them by hand? It's impossible because my participants are geographically distributed. And then it's far away. And then if I give them hard copies, it will be difficult for me to reach them. And then I choose to use Facebook message. And this is also problematic because in Facebook, because you can set the how you connect settings only to be approached by your friends, for example. And since I'm using snowball technique, so I have like so many teachers that I do not know before. So in reaching them, I have to go through like quite a long way, asking the one who recommend them to contact the future participant, and then from there I go like, instead of going this way, I going this way and this way to reach my future participants. So it's kind of like time consuming for me too. Okay, and then that's now solved the first problem, that I'm going to obtain the informed consent from my participants. But on my participant timelines, there will be other people who post and comment on that timelines. Should I obtain informed consent from them too? Because they are Facebook users as well. So if I'm going to obtain informed consent from everyone on the Facebook timeline, it will be very time consuming, and I might have to abandon my idea of using Facebook to gather evidence of informal learning. And then at that time I'm thinking I'm not going to ask to obtain informed consent from them. Furthermore, I argue that Facebook timeline is like a piece of fenced land. When you already obtain the informed consent from the landlord, then you are free to do whatever you want to do, since the landlord gives you permission. But then I'm questioned by ethical responsibility. If I'm at that people's place, I'm not be happy if somebody use my data. So after discussing with my supervisor, I decided that I will only obtain informed consent from those who comment on Facebook if I'm going to include their post and comment as data in my research. Okay. And then I'm presented with two choices of how to apply to go for the informed consent. The first one is to put the public notice on the timeline, saying that this timeline is being researched. So if you post in this timeline, your post and comment will be used in my data. But I found that it's not effective, because timeline is not like other online space, because when you post something, 5 minutes later it's already buried down. So for the newcomers, they might not know that this timeline is now being researched. So Yeah, so that's it. I go one by one to them to the Facebook message. Okay, and then I'm happy that I have made a very careful decision about obtaining informed consent, because this is one example that I get from my participants. I would rather answer your questionnaire, letting you observe my timeline feels like naked, bro. Ha ha ha. Can you imagine something that is very public on timeline? Some people think like it is very private. It's like you observing me getting naked. So the lesson learned here is that when researching on online space like this, whether what is private, whether what is public, whether you have to obtain consent or not, depends very much on the user itself. It's not on the guideline given by any, because this is unique. This is the one example. While others feel like things on their timeline are okay for me to observe, there are users who think that it is very strict and private and they don't want me to give access to that timeline. Okay, and then the second issue, ethical issue, is the protection of participants. This is just one of the examples. There are many more in USA. Teachers are fired because of the post and comment on Facebook. For example, in 2011, a teacher posts, I'm a warden for future, I'm not a teacher, I'm a warden for future criminals. And because of that, she was fired. And in Malaysia, during the election, there are many more arrested and detained by the police because of their posts and comments on Facebook. So I'm embarking on a very sensitive area, and therefore I have to be very careful in protecting my participants. And this has led me to be very careful with the issue of confidentiality and anonymity, in which I'm not only change names, but I also change the details that might make the person easily identifiable. And this is also important for me in deciding which part of Facebook that I want to observe. So in the end, I decided to exclude Facebook page, because every comment made on Facebook page is set to be seen by public by default. So everyone can, it is indexed by search engine. So in the end, I just decide to generate data from Facebook timeline and a closed Facebook group, so that it's not indexed by search engine. And by doing this, I reduce the risk of my participant posts and comments to be retrieved by others who read my thesis or my article later. Yeah, and then this is the last issue, which is the personal security. You know, because like I'm dealing with my participants using my Facebook account, so I have to be very careful in protecting my personal security, because on my timeline there is my employer's name, my phone number. So you know, so there it might get abused. You know, because I'm not contacting 56 teachers and I do not know them. So in protecting myself, I have deleted all that background information on Facebook, so that they do not have access to my personal information that might jeopardize my future if I do something wrong to them. Maybe, perhaps, I don't know. Yeah, and that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, Anna's raised some very interesting issues, so perhaps we could have a few questions.
Yeah, thank you.
I was wondering, is there something written in the Code of Ethics for teachers that somehow allows these authorities to see those types of posts as being,
you know, on paper, of course, it might not be stated. It won't be stated that teachers cannot post this kind of thing, this kind of that. But it's kind of like cultural expectations, where teachers are expected, like in Vietnam, like teachers are expected to be the modest person, to be very polite, you know, that kind of thing. So when they post something like it's considered impolite by the community, by the local community, it backlashes them. Any more questions? Yeah.
Thanks. That was really interesting. I wonder, when you're actually have you got data yet about what teachers use or how they learn, and what kind of, is it peer, is it group learning between teachers, are they interacting? Is there any particular area where you could say a category of learning that goes on particularly effectively?
It's So basically, I've just finished my data collection last May, and then I found that teachers mainly use Facebook to express their feelings and then reflect on critical incidents that happens in the school. Any critical incidents, be it the problem with the students, problem with colleagues, problems with school administration, and that's for Facebook timeline. It's more like supporting things. But on Facebook group, it's a learning in which teachers share materials, teaching pedagogy experience, what works in their classroom, what does not work in their classroom. So basically, I got two different sets of data. Timeline is more about failings, about socializing, but has some sort of reflection that helps them to better understand their role as a teacher. But in the Facebook group, it's more like the practical things, what to do in classroom, what to do in class, what to do with weak students. Yeah. Yes.
I think it's very interesting. In a way, it seems like you're maybe having to break this new ground around some of the ethical problems and issues around ethnographic research on sorts of virtual environments. And I suppose there have been arguments for a long time around sort of participants' observation and the ethics around that and obtaining consent, particularly when observing large numbers of people. And obviously within a virtual learning environment, that's now shifted into how that's done. Are there any sort of previous examples or previous sort of researches that you've drawn on to help inform you how to sort of get over some of these ethical issues, and examples of this already being done or kind of previously?
Yeah, there are many research actually that embarks on online learning, but very limited on Facebook. So basically, because basically, when you read different research, different piece of paper that talk about methodological issues, they have different views. They justify whether they want to observe, whether they want to obtain informed consent. It is based on their justification. So I found that the justification is unique to individual in the research that I've done. And even though BERA guideline, it does not provide a very specific things on how to go with the ethical issues of online learning. Like for me, I discovered by myself that it is very important to look at the statement of use of the online space, if there's any that stated that whether you have to obtain informed consent, whether you don't have to. So yeah, so that's it. But basically I found that Hein 2008 ethical issues in virtual ethnographic research is very helpful in guiding me in tackling the methodological and ethical issues. Any more questions? Jessica.
It's so interesting. I'm not quite sure if it's a question or a comment. I'm really interested how different this is across different disciplines and in different schools. Because if you go to the linguistics department, not only do they think that it's not a problem being a lurker at all, they don't think there's sort of really any issues about consent, but also in all of the publications, they think that actually traceability is important. So they'll put up user profiles because the disciplinary background suggests that you should be able to go, if this is an open source thing online, you should be able to go and have a look at it. I'm really interested with your participant who said, looking at my timeline makes me feel like I'm naked. And I think their view would be, don't get naked online then. So I'm really interested as to what your views are, or whether you've found that kind of disparity across different departments.
I'm not because to me, like, it very much, it's not about department, it's not about field, it very much depends on the individual user. So I should say that, we go for the user. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.